Whew, it is a hot one out there today. If you don't believe me, let me put on Ace's hat and I'll tell you in a Texan accent. Yeehaw, partners! It's a scorcher out there today if I ever did see one, damn straight! Alright, so, I was going for a walk to the post office this morning, and it's just like, it's only like 3 blocks from my house, but I'm just like, doing this massive trek across like the Sahara Desert, essentially. But I took that to mean the universe telling me, well, for one thing, to stay in the house with modern air conditioning. That was one thing the universe was definitely telling me today. But the other thing it was telling me was, Matt, you need to do the rest of Ace's light novel. You said you were going to do chapters 2 and 3, and you know how I tend to do stuff sometimes. I'll come out here and be like, hey guys, alright, we're gonna do part 1 of this series today, and part 2 will be coming up pretty soon, and then like 9 months later happens, and I'm like, oh, okay, alright, so we'll get back to it. But no, there's another part of this that's also coming out. There's a part 2 of Ace's light novel that's gonna be released in English, I believe, in September. They're both already out in Japan, obviously, but I need to get on this. Okay, so we're to talk about this today. It's a hot out day. It works out perfect. Okay, so last time we only covered chapter 1, because chapter 1, I'm looking through all the chapters here. There's only 3 chapters in this book. It's a light novel. It's pretty light. You know, the pages are not really, they don't have that many, like, it's not like super crammed in with words, but chapter 1 was like 42 pages. Chapter 2 is only like 20-something pages, and then chapter 3 is also kind of long as well, around 40-something pages, okay? But still, like I said in the first part, it doesn't take very long to read this whole book. It took me like an hour and a half, 2 hours to read this whole damn thing. So, you know, even if you're a slow reader, you should be able to get through this pretty quickly. So, in the first chapter, we learn about how Ace met Mass Deuce, who would become his first mate at the Spade Pirates. They were stranded on this island in the East Blue called Sixus. They met each other, and remember, this entire story is told from Mass Deuce's perspective, not really from Ace's perspective. Sho Hinata, who was the writer of this book, obviously Oda drew the cover page and everything like that, the cover for the book. Maybe Sho Hinata felt like, I'm not going to like write Ace's character because that's Oda's character, so he created a new character, Mass Deuce, to be the one that we're actually going to see all of the events transpire from, you know, his perspective, okay? So Ace meets Mass Deuce on Sixus. They build a raft together, and Ace finds the Marimarinomi on the beach. He eats it, gets the power. They train a little bit with it. Mass Deuce is like, hey, you could use your devil fruit as like propulsion. So that was like pretty smart, way to do that. So they get on the boat, which would later be called the Striker, and then they launch off into the sunset, and the Spade Pirate crew was founded there. So we're continuing on where we left off. Actually, not really. There's a little bit of a time skip here. Once again, light novel. We don't really have a lot of time to really, fit every little moment where Ace meets like every single member of the crew and like, join my crew, random individual, Hublot, join my crew. There actually is a guy named Hublot at the very end of the book. You get to see sketch artwork for. These are the main crewmates we're going to be talking about today. But then you also got everybody else. You got Kukai, you got Aggie68, you got Wallace, you got Camille, you got Banshee, Dogya. You got some Hublot, you have Finamore, Saber, just a guy named Saber. That dude looks pretty badass. Check that out. That's Saber right there. He uses 2 daggers as his main weapon, it seems. But yeah, got a lot of members of the crew. However, we're only really going to focus on 4 of them, plus Ace, the captain. Mass Deuce, Mihar, Skull, and Kotatsu. Kotatsu being the animal pet of the crew. Not really like Chopper, who can walk and talk, but Kotatsu is a pretty badass looking cat. So that's cool, like a saber-toothed tiger kind of cat, okay? So chapter 2 starts off with the crew already founded. The Spade Pirates are already a thing. They already have a ship. They already have a Jolly Roger. And all of those people I just mentioned are pretty much already on the crew. Chapter 2 is pretty much for us to get used to the crew dynamic as well as the main antagonist that they're going to be facing off against. Sort of like how Luffy has Smoker, Garp, and Roger had their little back and forth. We get to find out the Marine opponent of Ace that we see here in the cover. That is Nailing Isuka, who is a Marine ensign, okay? So chapter 2 starts off with the Spade Pirate ship being attacked by bounty hunters, okay? Something we do get to see every now and then in One Piece, but not as much as I would like. Of course, when the crew went to Whiskey Peak, they were attacked by like that army of like 100 bounty hunters working for Baroque Works, and Zoro sliced them all down. That was really cool. But a lot of times in the story, at least in the canon of the manga beyond that point, we don't really get to see the Straw Hats getting attacked by bounty hunters very often. And there might be honestly a good reason for that, because, it's one thing in this instance where the only person person on the crew that has a bounty at this point, I believe, is Ace, the captain. But when you get to the Straw Hat crew, especially where they're at right now, like, everybody has a bounty, and Luffy's bounty is like 1.5 billion. Like, if you're just a small town bounty hunter, you're not gonna screw with that. You're not even gonna get within 5 miles of the Thousand Sunny. You see the Thousand Sunny, and it's like, sir, there's a pirate ship. Oh, maybe we can get some bounties. I'm like, yeah, no, it's a lion sunflower ship. Holy crap, it's the Straw Hats! Bail! Bail! You know, like, I'm imagining that would happen in that a lot of cases in the New World anyway. But in this one particular instance, Ace is the only one that has a bounty, so some bounty hunters basically set up a situation where their ship is, like, stranded or damaged in the middle of the open water, and Ace being a nice guy, and there's even this little section here where, you know, Deuce kind of goes into it, and he's like, well, you know, even if it doesn't matter if you're a pirate or a marine or whatever, if you see a ship that kind of stranded, you're gonna kind of feel for them, because everybody that lives life on the open sea kind of knows how horrible it would be to be stranded in the middle of the Grand Line and then die of like starvation or being baked by the sun, you know. So he mentions that, like, even if you are like an enemy pirate, you might stop anyway, because I mean, for one thing, you're pirates. If the crew is dead, you could always steal their booty, but also it's just like, all right, nobody deserves that kind of fate, right? So the bounty hunters though know this, and they set it up as just like, oh, we're here, we're stranded, we're dying. And then Ace stops. He's like, you need some help? He's like, yeah, you can help us to your bounty hole. Okay, that sounded, the bounty hole, that's a thing now. All right, so we basically get to see all of the major members of the Spade crew fighting against these bounty hunters. We get introduced to Skull, who is a pirate fanboy, for lack of a better term. As you can see, he's decked out with a bunch of skulls, and like his entire life he's just like, man, I really love pirates. I mean, I don't want to be a pirate, but I really love pirates. So he would like sneak onto pirate ships, not because he wants to be a pirate, but because he just like wants to be there and just watch them do what they do, I guess. You know, so he would sneak on pirate ships and be like the annoying fanboy, and the pirates wouldn't even kill him. They would just kind of like drop him off at the nearest port and be like, okay, kid, you snuck aboard, that's great, get off the ship, you're too weird, you know? And so he would do this, and he knows a lot about like information gathering, and he's a really good deckhand. Eventually he joined Ace's crew, but once again, Skull does not refer to himself as a pirate. He refers to him as just an informant. Oh yeah, I'm not a part of this crew properly as a pirate. I'm just like a third-party free agent, you know, freelancer, basically. I'm just here helping out the Spade pirates and living on their ship and, you know, listening to Ace as a captain, but I'm not a pirate! You know what I mean? He's a pirate fanboy. Just go all the way, Skull, you got this, okay? So there's a really funny scene where he's brawling with one of the members of the bounty hunter crew, and the bounty hunter takes out a gun and tries to shoot Skull with it. However, Skull, like, he nerds out over it, kind of like how Tashigi nerds out over katanas. He nerds out over the gun, and he's just like, oh man, I remember that gun, that's really popular a couple years back, but it was discontinued, and you know why? He's like, why? Click, what? And it's because the gun misfires often, and so he was just like, that's the reason why. But it's really cool, I'll put this in my collection, thank you. So that's Skull. He's a pretty cool guy, kind of guy. Then we got Mihar. Mihar is, this is a little weird. His nickname is Teach, because he used to be a teacher. Alright, but it's a little weird when you're reading a light novel based around Portgas D. Ace, and you see, you know, characters, or you hear characters saying, hey, Teach, come over here! And I'd be like, because eventually, not up to this point yet, you know, Ace is still the captain of his own crew at this point. It's not until we get to the New World where he's going to meet Whitebeard and join his crew and everything like that, but, you know, Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach, so you get, it's a little weird. But anyway, yeah, you got Teach, who's this really shy kind of former teacher, and he's a sharpshooter, okay? So he'll usually just stay in the cabins or, you know, somewhere in the depths of the ship. He'll never come out on the deck to, like, fight, you know, hand to hand. That's not really his thing. He'll just kind of, like, stay in his quarters and just, is like, have his gun, his rifle ready to go, and then whenever someone is like, ah! He's like, boom! And then shoots him in from the distance. So like, thank you, Mihar! Okay, guys, you go, you do it. I'm gonna be in here. I'm gonna help out as much as I can, but you guys have fun. You know, that's basically Mihar. So he's a pretty cool guy. And then you got Kotatsu, who is a cat, like a saber-toothed tiger sort of cat creature. And Ace basically found him trapped inside of a poacher's trap on a random island. Once again, Ace is a nice guy, so he frees Kotatsu, and Kotatsu just kind of followed them around and just chills out on like the deck of the ship or sleeps in like Ace's captain cabin. So know, Kotatsu is an interesting character here. The animal companion of the Spade Pirates. Every crew needs an animal companion, okay? It's just that the Straw Hats one just can talk, you know? But Kotatsu's neat. So that's, like I said, and also Mass Deuce, we've already established him. That's like the main crew that we're going to be dealing with here. I think some other named members of the crew are like dropped in the light novel, and Oda himself drew concept art for all of like 20 members of Ace's crew, but they don't really play a pivotal role during this light novel. I haven't read the second one. Maybe they do. And then the last person we're introduced to in this chapter is the Marine antagonist of Ace, Nailing Isuka. So basically how this works is that after the crew takes care of the bounty hunters, the Marines then show up. This Marine fleet shows up with battleships led by Ensign Isuka. And Isuka's like the typical kind of, she's very, not absolute justice, but probably more like moral justice, I would say, from given what we're going to see more for her character in Chapter 3. But she's like, I'm the Marine, you know, Pirate Portgas D. Ace, Fire Fist, I'm here to bring you in. And so she's very noble and stuff like that. She's not a corrupted Marine, so very much kind of like Smoker in that regard. Think more of like that. Think of Smoker, except, you know, instead of like a large man in his 30s that smokes like a bunch of cigars a day, a petite woman with red hair in her early 20s, I guess, and that uses a rapier. That's essentially what we're dealing with here, okay? Now, one thing I will bring up that I wish was different is that her rank of Ensign. Ensign, if you don't know, is the lowest officer rank in the Marines. That's the rank that you get when you're finally allowed to wear the Justice Coat and you can actually command like some ships. You know, you are a Marine officer at this point, but it's the lowest rank. Tashigi became an ensign after they were promoted at Alabasta. She was, I think, a Chief Petty Officer or a Master Chief Petty Officer at Logtown, and then Smoker was a captain at Logtown, and then after the events of Alabasta, Tashigi became an ensign and Smoker became a full-on Commodore, okay? He's a Vice Admiral right now and Tashigi's a captain, right? I don't know. I just feel like, you know, I feel like she could have a higher rank. That's what I felt. I felt like she could be like a lieutenant. That would make more sense. Because Luffy was already dealing with Smoker as a captain at Logtown, right? And, you know, they was kind of like, okay, they had to deal with Full Body, who was a lieutenant. He wasn't really much of a threat. So, I don't know. I know Marine rank doesn't really necessarily mean, just like bounty doesn't necessarily mean that you're super strong if you have a high bounty. It doesn't equate to strength automatically. But I just feel like Isuka should have like at least a little bit of a higher rank as like a lieutenant or lieutenant commander, maybe something like that, you know, a little bit higher up, or hell, even make her a captain, okay, because she is pretty strong. She seems like she's commanding a fleet of Marine ships. I don't even know if an ensign could do that. I don't even know if an ensign could command like a fleet of Navy vessels as it was depicted here. Maybe they were like smaller Navy vessels. They weren't all like massive battleships. Like she wasn't commanding a buster call or anything. But yeah, that's one thing I would have preferred, but you know, whatever. That's what we get. And her name is Nailing Isuka because she utilizes a rapier, so she like punches you, you know, through holes, like, you know, nailing a board or something like that, right? Ace first thinks like, oh, Nailing Isuka, what is she, a shipwright or something? It's like, yeah, that's the immediate joke I would immediately go to when I hear her epithet is Nailing Isuka. Okay. Also, something else that's brought up here, and it's mentioned in the design art for her. So Isuka is also a word for crossbill, which is a type of bird that has a bill, a kind of beak that kind of like crosses back and forth. Here's a picture of it. The bird fabled to have attempted to remove the nails in Christ's hands. Okay, so there's some biblical references to the title as well. So anyway, Isuka shows up with her ships, and she's like, I'm gonna bring you in, Fire Fist Ace. However, Deuce is very clever here, and they kind of like maneuver their ship and the battleship fleet into basically really rough, choppy waters with a bunch of whirlpools and like rocks and stuff. So they lead them into a bad part of the ocean where the, you know, like Ace's Spade crew can escape, but Isuka's fleet kind of gets caught in this. Isuka actually ends up in the water. She doesn't have a devil fruit or anything, but the water is really dangerous and choppy, and it's looking like she's not going to make it. So Ace, of course, can't jump into the water because he's a devil fruit user, but he takes a flotation device, like a flotation ring, like a floaty water toy, and throws it off the deck of his ship, and it lands, and Isuka grabs it. And so at that point, Isuka, she doesn't really enter tsundere mode, but she's kind of like, oh, well, just because you saved me this one time, don't think that leaves you off the hook. I'm going to capture you, Fire Fist, hey! And that's kind of where the chapter ends right there. Like, all right, you have fun with that. All right, men, hard to port, starboard, whatever direction is forward, let's go. All right, and so like I said, that chapter not very long. It was just kind of introducing us to the main members of the Spade crew and our primary antagonist here, who's going to be Isuka. But is she going to be an antagonist for long? I guess we'll just have to wait until part 3, where we cover chapter 3. Right now. Okay, so chapter 3, this is a really awesome chapter. I love this one. This is obviously the climax of this one part of the book, but it's really cool. So this covers Ace and the Spade Pirates landing at the Sabaody Archipelago. They're halfway point at the Grand Line. Like I said, we're skipping over a lot of this stuff. But hey, you know what? If somebody else at one point wants to write another novel about Ace, there's a lot of opportunities here that are open-ended, okay? So they land at the Sabaody Archipelago here. Skull, being an informant, he knows all about how to get to Fishman Island. He's read up on this. He knows how to... Okay, guys, it's sort of like if a character, like if somebody like that isekai thing I was doing, where it's like if you get sucked into the One Piece world, you're kind of like Skull, where it's like, okay, guys, we're at the Sabaody Archipelago, we're at the halfway point for the Grand Line. These are the hustle muscle mangrove trees. They emit a resin that creates bubbles. That's really cool. We need to get our ship coated and then head down to Fishman Island. I'll take care of that. Don't worry. So Skull is a really practical kind of individual. He kind of knows like one of the shipwrights or ship coating mechanics on the island. It's not Rayleigh. In fact, I don't think Rayleigh or Shaki are even mentioned in this chapter at all, but Skull knows a guy, so he's like, all right, I'll take the ship and some other members, I'll make sure to get it coated, it's gonna take a few days, just don't cause a ruckus on the island, everything should be good. Now, of course, this is Ace we're talking about, who's a little bit more respectful than Luffy, of course, but still, it's Ace that we're talking about here, okay? So what Ace immediately does upon landing on the island, essentially, is just rush off into town. You know, they're trying to explain everything about how, like, there's lawless areas on the Sabaody Archipelago, you gotta be careful where you go. Some places are ruled completely by bounty hunters and people that, like, kidnap individuals, and then there's also an amusement park. So it's kind of like you have to be careful where you go, but Ace just kind of like, you know, he smells some really good food and he just rushes off, leaving his wallet behind. So Mass Deuce has to be like, oh, crap, Ace, and so he picks up Ace's wallet and he's like, all right. So most of this chapter is like Ace just rushing off, eating all the different things at the food stalls and just dining and dashing constantly, where Deuce has to kind of like, you know, follow him. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry for him. Here's some berries. I'm sorry, what did he eat? Oh my god, he ate that much? 1,000 berries for a single pot pie? That's kind of highway robbery, but whatever, here you go. And so, like, that's how it is. Meanwhile, Isuka is also present on the island, and she kind of arrives at the Spade Pirates ship while Ace is running off, so Ace isn't even there at the moment, but she shows up at the ship, and she's very clearly on vacation. It was a very funny scene where she shows up, and she's wearing, like, casual wear, like, just a t-shirt and some jeans, and she has, like, a bunch of, like, bags, like, she's obviously been shopping on vacation, and she's like, oh, you guys, well, I'm not on vacation or anything, but I'm still gonna bring you in, and everyone's like, yeah, she's totally on vacation. Look, she's wearing a Sabaody, she's wearing a t-shirt, she's like, I'm wearing a t-shirt from Disneyland, but I'm not on vacation at Disneyland, you know, so that was pretty funny. It was also established that Isuka's been kind of clingy with the Spade Pirate crew. It's like, oh my god, it's her again. To the point where they're not even afraid of her anymore. Like, when they first showed up, like, that's nailing Isuka. She's a Marine ensign. She's gonna bring us in. We better be careful. But then, like, the next day she shows up, and then the next day she shows up, and then the next day she shows up again, and, like, this continues for weeks and months, and it's like, they've run into her so many times, she might as well not even be an enemy of the crew anymore. She's obviously more of just, like, an acquaintance, not like a really good friend, but like, hey, Isuka, how you been? Didn't see you yesterday, wondering when you were gonna show up. Stop it, Ace, I'm gonna bring you in. Yeah, okay, alright. Hey, you want some breakfast? We're just having breakfast over here. Skull, toss her a croissant. Like, so, they're not even really afraid of her at this point. And also, I mean, Ace is a damn Logia. Like, there's no real threat here. I'm gonna bring you in, Ace. Nailing Isuka rapier power. So, how you been? You know, like, it's not hurting Ace at all. Isuka does not know hockey, but it's just kind of this dynamic they have going on here. And they're like, dude, Captain Ace isn't even here. He ran into town. You know, check the amusement park, I guess. So Isuka goes looking after Ace, and it was a kind of a funny moment. Now, once again, like I said in the first chapter of this, there's a few moments here that seem maybe not necessarily contrived, but they seem like they would maybe flow better in a manga format where you could see the character's expression and the face faults in the comedy rather than just like a written book. It was that scene in the first chapter where, you know, for some reason it's like, okay, Deuce really needs to learn about Goldie Roger being Ace's dad. So you have that weird line of dialogue where it's like, oh, well, you know, I grew up with really nobody in my family that really cared about me. What about you, Ace? I bet you had family that loved you. And Ace was like, well, my mom died before I was born, or died during, my mom died before I was born. Man, that's kind of difficult, actually. My mom died giving birth to me, so I didn't know her at all. It's like, oh, well, I bet your dad, I bet you have, you know, you remember your dad. He's like, well, my dad also died before I was born. That was the one thing. And he's like, oh, well, oh, I bet you at least, your dad's not Goldie Roger, king of the pirates or something. That would be horrible. And Ace is like, well... So that was a little bit kind of forced in my opinion. So there's this other scene here, which I don't find it forced. I just find it kind of goofy, but it's really funny. Okay, so they're in the Sabaody Park, right? And Masked Deuce kind of like is like running after Ace and paying for everything, and he's kind of like, man, this is difficult being the first mate of this crew. But Deuce also sees the Ferris wheel at Sabaody Park, and Ace kind of catches him staring at it like he's eating a corn dog or something. So what, you want to go on the Ferris wheel? I'm like, no, I don't. I mean, I've never been on one before. So I'm like, oh, okay, you're a tsundere too. I see. All right, come on, Deuce, let's go on the freaking Ferris wheel. So, you have this scene where Ace and Deuce are going to go on a Ferris wheel ride together, so that's adorable. But then Isuka shows up at that last moment, and it's this goofy scene where it's like, okay, Ace is a pirate with Logia powers, a pirate captain with Logia powers. He's a super rookie at this point, essentially. Masked Deuce is his first mate, and Isuka is a marine officer. So they're all in front of, like, the cabin, or the bubble gondola, or whatever, because it's a bubble Ferris wheel, okay? So they're all in front of the Ferris wheel, like, arguing with each other, and the guy that's running the ride for the Ferris wheel just kind of, like, shoves them, like, okay, kids, all right, kids, get in now, get in now. And they end up in this awkward scene where Isuka, Masked Deuce, and Ace all end up in the same cabin together, riding this Ferris wheel all the way to the top, stop, and then all the way. So they're just like, all right, well, this is awkward times 100. All right. So this is a point, though, where we find out Isuka's backstory. And like I said, like, this is kind of the moment where it's like, all right, we need a moment where Isuka can explain her backstory to Ace and Masked Deuce. So here it is. They're all in a Ferris wheel together. It's happening now. So just deal with it, okay? So they're in the Ferris wheel, and something that Isuka has, and it's not very prominent here because she wears gloves, but her hand is badly burned. And I don't think she's wearing gloves here because she's on leave or whatever. But anyway, her hand is burned. So I think Deuce asks her about that. He's like, well, this is kind of, I mean, this whole thing is pretty awkward right now in a Ferris wheel with our marine enemy, but, you know, what's up with your arm is, you know, if you don't mind telling us. And she explains that when she was a little girl, her homeland, her town, her village was attacked by pirates. And there was a marine, at that point, I think he was just like a lieutenant commander named Draw that saved her, but her parents ended up dying. Okay, and so the pirates set the whole village on fire, and pretty much everybody died except for her, and then Draw saved her, and that's when she realized, I'm going to grow up to be a marine just like Draw, and I'm going to bring in the bad pirates that ruin homes and families and stuff. Also, the fact that Ace literally has the power of fire incarnate, that might also be the thing that, like, you know, she's looking at the boards, and she's like, Fire Fist Ace, he has the power of the Marimara no Mi, I'm going to bring him in, because she's kind of traumatized by that fire, and she has a bad burn on her arm, okay? So we learn about Isuka's past there. Also, I think a little bit earlier in the chapter, we learn about Ace a little bit more, where Masked Deuce and Ace are in kind of like the slums area of the Sabaody archipelago, where, you know, there's people that aren't there for like tourism, they're just like living, like scraping by, they're not doing very well for themselves. There's this little area that's kind of run down in the lawless area, and Ace is eating all this food, and then some kids come up to him and like, sir, can we have something to eat? And Ace is like, oh no, you know what, I think I'm full. And he gives the food off to the kids, and the kids are happy, and Masked Deuce is like, oh really, I thought you were hungry just a second ago. He's like, nah, I think I'm full. So that was some more stuff about Ace's character that was pretty neat. Okay, so we find out about that. And so the Ferris wheel ride kind of stops abruptly. Ace just kind of leaves, you know, when it gets to the top. He uses his Marimara now powers to just like escape the Ferris wheel. But then Masked Deuce and Isuka are like, wait, Ace, we can't, So, you're a Marine. Yep. I'm a novelist. And a pirate, I guess. I know. Yeah. Man, when's this thing gonna hit the ground, huh? That's an awkward moment there. But anyway, so there's a little bit of a break in the action here in between this moment. Like, Isuka leaves, and she's like, okay, fine, I was on leave anyway, I was on vacation, so I'm not gonna bring you in today, but I'll be back tomorrow. So we skip to, like, tomorrow, okay? It's like the next day, the ship is still being coded, it's still being worked on, okay? So at this point, though, we get to the climax of the light novel, at least the first part of the light novel, okay? Where Isuka is back on duty, and there's a marine base at the Sabaody Archipelago, remember that. So, Vice Admiral Draw, who is the same person that helped out Isuka when she was a little girl and saved her and everything from the fire that the pirates started in her hometown. Draw arrives on the Sabaody Archipelago, and Isuka's there with him, and they're going to deliver a letter. They're there to deliver a letter of invitation from, the world nobles, from the Gorosei to Ace to become a member of the Warlords. This was something that was established earlier. It was kind of like mentioned offhandedly. Ace was recommended, or he was invited to be a warlord, but he decided, nah, man, I don't want anything to do with that, so he turned it down. Well, in this light novel, we find out the events of what led to that. So at the Sabaody Archipelago, he got asked to join the Warlords by Vice Admiral Draw, and Isuka's there, and Ace is just kind of like, nah, you know what, I really don't like the Warlord system that much, and Draw just kind of like, you know what, that makes two of us. And Isuka's kind of like, because Isuka, I guess it would be easy just to say Isuka's got the hots for Ace. See what I did there? Maybe she does, but if nothing else, she kind of views Ace as a good person. She originally thought, like, oh man, this is a pirate that has the power to, like, light fires. He's easily going to be the most evil person ever because of what happened with my family. But she meets him and gets to know him and talks to Deuce about him, and she realizes Ace isn't really a bad guy. And so Isuka's like, wait, if you join the Warlords, everything will be good. You'll work for us, then you won't be a bad person anymore. You won't be a pirate anymore, right? You can work for the government. And Ace just turns it down flat, and Draw's like, yeah, I figured you would. That's fine anyway. That means I get to turn you in right here. I get to bring you in right here. So Draw rips up the invitation, and then the fight is on, all right? So Draw is a Vice Admiral, so he has hockey at his disposal, and he doesn't have a Devil Fruit, but Draw's main weapon is actually dual flamethrowers that he has, like, hidden under his marine cuffs. So he just, like, all right, Ace, bring it on. Let's see which one's fires hotter. And so Ace is like, whoa! And then it's like a fire battle right in the middle of the slum district of the Sabaody Archipelago, right? Now, you might think that's not a great, like, you're fighting fire with fire here, which I guess that's logical. I mean, I always thought you fought fire with, like, water, or maybe a fire extinguisher or something, but in this case, whatever. Fire versus fire. Now, even if you're gonna go with the logic, though, of the whole Akainu thing with, like, magma is hotter than fire, even though it really isn't. It's like, magma's hotter than, I mean, not necessarily hotter. Magma's hotter than fire, therefore I can hurt you. Even if we're gonna go with this logic, you could see a bunch of different ways this is going to fail horribly for Draw. Because Draw, and by the way, his name in the English version here, I think is like Dororu. It's spelled like D-O-R-R-O-W in here. But on the wiki, and I think it's supposed to be draw because it's like, draw, and like use the flamethrowers. I think that's the reference. But anyway, you don't even have to think that long about it to see the weakness there. There's actually a bunch of different weaknesses. Okay, so for one weakness, his flamethrowers are flamethrowers. They have a set amount of fuel on the tank on his back. So eventually you're gonna run out of fuel. Meanwhile, Ace could just he can keep this up for a while, okay? He can keep this going for a while, right? Because he has basically infinite fire. He can turn into fire. Ace could easily just turn into fire and just like appear behind him and like, haha! And the other big weakness is, dude, you got a giant fuel tank on your back, which is kind of a target, It's just like, all you got to do is hit that with the fire, and then the whole thing just goes up, and it's just not going to end well, right? So, it's actually Mass Deuce, though, that jumps in and kind of, like, stops Draw. He jumps in, he's like, no! And he jumps on Draw, and they kind of scuffle a little bit, and Draw gets his fuel tank disengaged, Mass Deuce grabs it and just, like, unplugs his fuel tank, and so there's fuel going everywhere, and he just Well, that's the end of Draw. That was easy. And during the course of this fight, Ace also awakens the power of his armament hockey. He also learns power of armament hockey there, just like the beginning stages there. Kind of similar to how Luffy, right around the time he arrived at the Sabo Archipelago, when they arrived at Duval's little base of operations, Luffy first exhibited his Conqueror's hockey against Motoboro, the bull that Duval had, right? So kind of similar to that there. So Ace learns a little bit about hockey, and we learn that flamethrowers are not as good as the Marimara no Mi. Something else we also find out here, Isuka learns from Draw, because Draw is just indiscriminately firing his flamethrowers all over this slum, and it's burning houses down, and like there's children that are living there and all that stuff. And we learn that the person that set the fires to the hometown where Isuka grew up, that was actually not pirates. Pirates attacked the village, sure. The Marines showed up to stop it, but Draw just indiscriminately just flamethrower everything! And so that's the thing that started the fire that killed Isuka's parents. And she always thought that, like, oh, you saved me because you're a Marine. And, you know, Draw's not, like, so monstrous that it's like, oh, there's a little girl here, I'm gonna save her. But it was because of me that her village and her home and her parents all burned away into ash. So Draw does not view Isuka as like, oh, you're my daughter, or I'm gonna care for you, or your home was ravaged by pirates, I really care for your plight. No, he's the kind of guy, he is a little bit more Akainu, absolute justice kind of thing, where it's just like, pirates are attacking the village, burn the whole thing down! You know, that's basically his logic there. But anyway, he gets defeated in the final climactic battle, and the ship gets coated, and they part ways with Isuka there, and Isuka kind of rediscovers herself, and she's like, I know what kind of Marine I want to be from now on. I certainly don't want to be like this guy. And they get on the ship that gets coated, and they head on down to Fishman Island, and then that's the way this light novel ends there. We also get, like I said, some stuff at the end, like cover designs, and we also get little recaps of, like, Ace's adventures, you know, when he met Luffy and everything. But during the next part of this light novel, which I have not really read, I haven't even really read the plot synopsis or the summaries or anything on the wikis yet of the next manga, the next light novel, is going to be involving, well, just look at the cover. That's literally all I have to go off here. It's going to involve Ace meeting with Whitebeard in the New World, and probably Jinbei when they had their little battle, and also the whole thing with his hunt for Blackbeard after the death of Thatch. Thatch also might be a character in this one. I don't know. So this one comes out, I believe, in September. So just wait for that one. When that comes up, I'll review that one just like this one. And so, yeah. The man who was closer than anyone to the One Piece. Their target, their destination was the New World and Whitebeard. Slowly the ship sank deeper and deeper into the darkness. So Ace at this point was just like, man, I want to be king of the pirates. Who's the person closest to being the king? Whitebeard. All right, so he's taking a much more, like, proactive approach than Luffy. There we go. So he's taking a much more proactive approach than Luffy did. Luffy was just like, come on, guys, let's get together. I'm going to be king of the pirates. How? I don't know. I'll make it work somehow. Ace is like, all right, I want to be king of the pirates, or I'm going to be a greater pirate than Roger was. Who's the person closest to being the pirate king right now? That'd probably be Whitebeard. All right, cool. Our target is Whitebeard. And so that kind of sets everything up for the next part. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm going to go make cookies. I have this weird desire to make cookies today. I don't know why. It's not for, like, I have to do a video on cookies or anything, like the Cookie Monster or anything. I'm just really hungry for cookies. So I'm going to go do that. You guys stay cool or stay warm wherever you're at in the world right now. You could be watching this in Antarctica for all I know. Yeah. Signing out, partners.